Good morning. This is Victoria Glick, OSSE's Deputy Assistant Superintendent in the Special Education Division at OSSE. I hope this finds you well. We are happy to have you all here with us today for the LEA Special Education Point of Contact monthly webinar. A copy of today's presentation will be made available on the OSSE website. We are currently building a new platform for all of our special education monthly point of contact webinars, and so you'll receive notification of that through our LEA Look Forward. As soon as it's live, it'll have the last couple presentations along with this one. We can skip right to our agenda this morning. We have a number of topic areas we want to cover with you in our preparation as a district for the start of school. We have some policy reminders and updates, IDEA monitoring updates, LEA guidance for timely transportation services for next school year, for those of you who will be needing your students transported to school buildings, end of year SEDS closeout information on your child outcome summary, and then a few announcements and reminders that are primarily related to all of the professional development and training opportunities and archive trainings around SEDS and some of the other systems that support your work. And so we invite you to join us for the full hour so that you can receive all that information. This is going to be a jam-packed session, and we hope that you will use the recorded version and the PDF version of this document once posted as a resource for your work in the coming weeks as you gear up for a unusual but exciting start of school year 2021. So next up, we have some policy reminders and updates for you. You usually would hear from Christy Weaver-Harris, who is our policy director at OSSE for IDEA Part B work, and I'm filling in for her today. She's been out on leave and has just returned. You'll see her contact information included on the last slide of this presentation, and you can send policy questions to her. But I encourage you to utilize the resources that we've included here today to research your questions and concerns, and to learn more about your LEA's obligations and the state agency's expectations as it relates to rolling out planning for the next school year. Since the start of this public health emergency, OSSE has issued a series of IDEA Part B FAQs. The most recent one was issued on May 29th, and it included information related to general IDEA Part B procedures, some waivers around licensure requirements for healthcare providers that apply to some related service provision, LEA recovery planning and comp ed and the distinction between those and how they relate in your recovery planning and implementation work. And then the enrollment of students with disabilities in DC LEAs. Coming soon in the very near future, meaning by the end of the month, OSSE will issue a guidebook on IDEA Part B provision of FAPE for the 2021 school year. This is guidance related to distance and blended learning. The guidebook will consolidate all of the relevant portions of the previously issued FAQs for Part B and non-public students. We're issuing this to answer, additional questions regarding some best practices, serving students who are medically fragile in remote and blended learning models, and parent training as a related service. It will also provide guidance related to LEA planning for inclusion of students with disabilities with their non-disabled peers to the greatest extent possible in your blended learning models that your schools are developing in their waiver plans. It's really important to note that this document is going to repeat a lot of the information previously issued, but reorganize it in a more accessible way. The 10 different guidance documents that OSSE issued from March until now around COVID response were reactive. They were answering your questions and parent questions as they were coming to us as quickly as we could, but we recognize that sifting through 10 different documents to find the answers you need for next school year is difficult, and so we're hopeful that this consolidated guidebook, along with additional guidance incorporated, will be helpful to you in your work and streamline some of your planning. I think we can move on to the next slide. I have some policy reminders for you related to your activities around students ages 3 through 5 who are a special population in the district that we are highly focused on. Under IDEA, LEAs are required to ensure that students receive a smooth and effective transition from Part C, early intervention services, to Part B, preschool special education services. And that includes that LEAs are required to participate in transition planning conferences as appropriate for these students. Transition conference invitations are sent by DC Strong Start, the early intervention program, and that transition conference notice constitutes a referral for evaluation for the purposes of IDEA Part B initial evaluations. When you're invited, an LEA must attend the transition planning conference to provide information on your LEA's programs. Reasonable efforts must be conducted for the purpose of obtaining the parent consent for initial evaluation at that transition conference. It's very important that your LEA be familiar with these responsibilities. They also include that the LEA develops an individualized education program by the child's 3rd birthday. This includes adhering to all of the initial evaluation processes and timelines, completing the eligibility determination, and developing the IEP if the student's found eligible. OSSE encourages LEAs to use the data and information provided by the early intervention program at Part C and the child's parent to inform the initial evaluation process and the IEP development if appropriate. As a third requirement for smooth and effective transition, LEAs are required to implement the IEP by the child's 3rd birthday. This means that all specialized instruction and related services in the child's IEP must be provided by the child's 3rd birthday. Specialized instruction must be provided if a child turns 3 on a non-school day, on the first day that the child's 3rd birthday, after the child's 3rd birthday, or stage 5 enrollment. All related services must be provided at least once within the 14 days of the child's 3rd birthday. And again, if that child turns 3 during the summer and the child does not qualify for related services as part of ESY, all related services must be provided at least once within 14 days of the first day of school after summer, which is stage 5 enrollment. All of those responsibilities are highly technical. We recognize that, and additional information on the specific requirements are linked here. They're also available in the regulations at 34 CFR 300.124. You can Google that, copy and paste that citation, and it'll populate in Google for you. But we also encourage you to access the OSSE website and review these requirements here. I have a little bit more C2B information. If we want to move on to the next slide. In the DL v. District of Columbia class action lawsuit regarding special education services for district children ages 3 through 5, the court determined that DC violated IDEA and the district law by failing to identify children with disabilities ages 3 through 5, failing to timely issue eligibility determinations, and failing to smoothly and effectively transition them from C to B, as we discussed on the previous slide. The court ordered the district to comply with specific metrics for children ages 3 through 5. Those include a district-wide child find rate of 8.5%, 95% timely eligibility determinations, and 95% smooth and effective C to B transition. As of today, we do not meet any of these metrics. And so we are helping the district across all of the education sector begin to work towards these requirements. One of those requirements is for specialized instruction. In order to meet these requirements, OSSE began requiring LEAs to track the start of specialized instruction in the last school year. This slide shows you what those specialized instruction tracking requirements are. For this school year, LEAs continue to be required to document the first provision of specialized instruction. You can do so in SEDS, in the Specialized Instruction Tracking Wizard. And you must do so for the following students listed here. LEAs are not required to document specialized instruction on an ongoing basis. And then there are several examples here of areas where students are not required to be tracked. I would encourage you to look into these. I guarantee you your LEA's previous compliance rates do not meet the mark. The district needs significant work in this area. OSSE will be reaching out over the fall to LEAs who are not compliant with this requirement. We encourage you to take a look at the OSSE Dear Colleague letter attached here outlining the requirements related to DL, VDC, as I discussed earlier, and to review the training slides that tell you exactly how and when to do this in SEDS. I think we can move to the next slide, and this will be my last 3 through 5-year-old update. I wanted to give LEAs a reminder about toileting policies and school enrollment as they relate to one another during the start of this school year while student enrollments are underway. LEAs may not exclude students from enrollment based on their disability, including any inability to complete toileting tasks or delays in toileting resulting from their disability. Doing so constitutes discrimination on the basis of a child's disability. I want to repeat that. Doing so constitutes discrimination on the basis of a child's disability. It has come to OSSE's attention that many LEAs have in their handbooks that they issue to parents at the start of school year that students who cannot meet toileting expectations will be excluded. LEAs are encouraged to design individualized supports through the IEP process in instances where a student's disability impacts their ability to perform age-appropriate toileting skills. Please review your policies and your parent handbooks and work with your leadership to revise these handbooks to reflect exceptions to toileting and definitions of school readiness, as I see written in to your policies, for students with disabilities who may have delays in toileting due to their disability. We will be contacting LEAs in the coming months to ensure that these activities are completed. Please put this on your to-do list for the start of school. I think we can move to the next slide. At start of school, we want to remind you of all the resources OSSE has available on our website that are linked here. As I encouraged you initially, please use these resources to research your questions and learn more about the state's expectations for compliance with IDEA requirements. Many of the questions you have are questions we have received before and are answered in these documents. We will also, if you can't find the answer, do our best to point you to where they lie. These are the key policies and guidance for start of school. They include this list of policy documents. If we want to go ahead to the next slide, we have a link here to view on-demand webinar videos that cover a wide variety of special education topics, including the basic tenets of special education policy, laws and regulations that you're required to follow, and then best practices on implementing all of those, because we understand there needs to be a practical connection between what's required and what you're doing in the classroom. On the next slide, I've included some additional special education resources around least restrictive environment. That is going to be integral in your work related to some of the distance and hybrid learning models that your LEAs are rolling out. PBIS, and then secondary transition toolkits are also here. On the next slide, we've included some additional toolkits related to the non-public program, standards-based IEP guidance, policy and practice series, and the student-led IEP initiative. We hope that these are resources that you can keep in your toolbox to help guide you through some of the work ahead. On the next slide, I want to flag for you that on May 20th, we held a 2-hour webinar on serving students with disabilities during periods of remote and blended learning. This was the big kickoff around OSSE's professional development designed to help LEAs implement the policy framework that we set out in March, April, and May related to COVID-19 emergency response and the continual redesigning of how you are delivering instruction to students with disabilities. You can find a recording of that webinar linked here. And in our reminder section, I'll give you information in a bit after some other folks speak about the 3-part professional development training series that Jen Carpenter in Teaching and Learning at OSSE is putting on this summer over the course of this summer that you are welcome to participate in. Now I'll hand this off to Tiffany Ingram, our expert monitor from the IDA Part B monitoring team here at OSSE, to discuss some IDA monitoring updates.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Victoria, for handing it off. And we do have a few updates around IDA monitoring that we'd like to share with the group. So beginning in the 1920 school year, we did have some updates in DCCATS, and in this section, we really want to talk about the verifying reasons around untimely evaluations and reevaluations, and then we'll also talk about our prong 1 and 2 process. The purpose of the untimely verification process allows LEAs to clarify their reasons and delay for accurate reporting, and provide LEAs the opportunity to identify areas of improvement, and also give OSSE data that can be utilized for targeted training and to overall support and increase our efforts in improving compliance. So many of you may have already seen these updates in DCCATS, but we wanted to highlight it for the good of the group. When looking at untimely initial evaluations, you will see 3 main drop downs in DCCATS: a corrected timely, where the initial evaluation was conducted within the 60-day timeline and should not be marked as non-compliant. Under corrected untimely, that is defined as initial evaluations were conducted but were held overdue. That's outside of the 60-day timeline. So within that, we have 3 drop-down buttons in DCCATS: parental delay, where the initial evaluation was untimely due to parental delay. And in that case, we will be looking for LEAs to upload 3 different contact attempts to show your reasonable efforts. We'll talk a bit more about that in a few more slides. LEA delay, where a student withdrew from your LEA, then re-entered within the 60-day timeline. And then another additional drop down available will be for LEA delay other reasons, where the initial evaluation was held late, but it was a delay caused by the LEA. Lastly, you will also see in DCCATS an option to select that the student was not enrolled on the eligibility due date. In regards to untimely reevaluations, similarly, you will see 3 drop-down options in DCCATS for you: the corrected timely, And that will be flagging for our monitors that the reevaluation process was actually conducted timely and shouldn't be marked as non-compliant. You will also get the same options for corrected untimely in regards to parental delay. Again, we're looking for those 3 different contact attempts to show that there was a delay on the behalf of the parent, a LEA delay where the student withdrew and then re-enrolled, and then you will have, again, the option for LEA other reasons, or the student was not enrolled in SEDS on the eligibility due date. We've received a lot of questions around parental delay and how OSSE is defining that. So we are seeing parental delay is in a situation where it is clear that the parent is continuously non-responsive to your attempts to make contact concerning the initial evaluation or re-eval. A parent is refusing to provide consent, or in the case that the parent is repeatedly missing and or initiating rescheduling of meetings and evaluations. I think the third point we really want to nail home is that you need to have documented evidence that shows that this parent is repeatedly missing meetings or rescheduling. They are initiating the rescheduling of meetings or evaluations to complete the eligibility process. In the case that you have a student that you want to document as saying, hey, this is parental delay, we are asking that your reasonable efforts consist of at least 3 documented attempts using at least 2 of the following modalities on at least 3 different dates. So that's telephone calls, an attempt to make a telephone call, the results of that, correspondence sent to parents and any responses received. So whether that is an email or a mail lettered home, letter emailed home, or even visits to the parent's home or place of employment and the results of that. So we are looking for your documentation to be clear in the communication log and says about your purpose in calling. So telephone calls to parent for the purpose of obtaining consent for initial evaluation. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides. We wanted to provide some examples of how the language that should be included in SEDS during your communication log. I think that this is a critical slide. And again, you'll have access to the PDF versions of this presentation. But we are looking for maybe, text the parent to reschedule missed evaluation session, but receive no response. A lot of times, I know it is very hard to list all these things in the communication log, but in regards to parental delay, it has to be very clear that you've reached out to the parent and the purpose of the communication and what the result was. So a purpose of example of language that wouldn't be included would be texted the parent because I haven't heard from her, or call the parent to schedule a meeting. So in those 2 cases, that would not be sufficient documentation for us because it does not clearly outline the purpose of the communication or for what meeting you are even trying to schedule. There could be any type of meeting that could be held, but we're looking for clearly communicated evaluation process, scheduling eligibility meeting. Things of that nature must be clearly outlined in your SEDS communication log. Jumping back to our IDA monitoring updates, we did want to highlight the prong 2 process on the call today. And in DCCATS, we're requiring LEAs to identify which students' files that the OSSE monitor should review for prong 2. Now, prior to the 2019 school year, OSSE monitors would randomly select files to review for prong 2. So we wanted to highlight the change in process going into a new school year for you all. So this is our timeline for correcting non-compliance. So prong 1 corrections are the expectation is that they are completed within 90 days of findings issued. In step 2, LEAs will be submitting the prong 2 files within 1 period. That's 30 days of the prong 1 closing. And in step 3, our OSSE monitors will review those files within 30 days of the LEA submission. In step 4, the goal is to be closing those findings as swiftly as possible. If your LEA does not submit prong 2 files within 2 periods of 60 days, OSSE may conduct an on-site visit to the LEA. And if OSSE determines files are not compliant, the LEA must correct all identified non-compliance and submit additional files for prong 2. And lastly, if the LEA does not engage in this process, OSSE will pull files without LEA engagement, and this may lengthen the overall timeline for the correction of non-compliance and impact your overall compliance rate. Just to highlight a few of our prong 2 changes, they're outlined here. The biggest one is that our change from the old prong 2 process is that monitors are pulling random samples from SEDS to review. In this new prong 2 process, the LEA is selecting current files, current compliant files for us to review on a set schedule. And then also you will see that the amount of files per every non-compliant file has also changed. If you need additional information around the prong 2 changes in DCCATS, we have linked a prong 2 tutorial in this presentation for you to review. But of course, if you have any additional concerns, please feel free to reach out to your OSSE monitor if you still have questions or concerns around the prong 2 process. Lastly, we wanted to add in some additional information around documenting COVID-19 related delays. As we are continuing monitoring throughout the summer, this will apply, and many of your eligibility compliance overall files will be flagged because it will be due to COVID-19. So we want to remind LEAs of what documentation we are looking for and related to COVID-19. So we are asking that for every student in which there is a COVID-related delay, that LEAs issue a prior written notice, including the reason for delay. And of course, that's going to be the unavailability of the student due to COVID-19, but also highlighting what creative and flexible solutions were considered, but ultimately determined unavailable. And lastly, which is very critical, any mutually agreed upon extension of time. So as we are now rolling out how things may look for the beginning of the school year, any date, if possible, that you and the parent have decided on to complete that eligibility process for the student, we are asking that you include that also in the PWN. For COVID-19 related delays, with and without a new agreed upon date between the LEA and parent, LEA should be selecting parental delay and including in that note section in DCCATS that the COVID-19 is the reason for delay and the new agreed upon date for the meeting or the evaluation to take place, if that applies. And we are asking that you upload that PWN into DCCATS as your evidence as you show what the next steps are in terms of when you will be meeting to complete that eligibility process, whether it's the meeting or the evaluation that still is outstanding for the student. We want to remind you of the upcoming monitoring activities. As we are in the month of July, we are looking already at reevaluation timeliness for Q4 and initial evaluation timeliness for Q4, as well as significant disproportionality. In August, we will be monitoring for significant discrepancy and disproportionate representation. We'll also be looking at secondary transition requirements and the C to B transition timeliness from July 1, 2019 to 2020. And then in September, we will be issuing the IDA LEA determinations. As Victoria shared, I am standing in for Karen this morning, and I will include her information is included at the end of the presentation if you have any questions or concerns about upcoming monitoring activities or around the prong 1 or prong 2 processes in DCCATS. I will be turning it over now to our transportation team to be providing some updates on timely transportation services and what's needed from you all going into the 2021 school year.
All right, good morning, everyone. I am Douglas Johnson. I will be going over the transportation guidelines and preparation as we prepare for school year 2020-21. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So as we know, this year is totally different from any year that we have prepared for school due to COVID. So outside of your normal schedule activities as a coordinator that you would normally do, this year we're really focusing on some key preparation items that the LEA need to consider when doing transportation for this upcoming school year. There'll be some critical preparation when it comes to transportation services and when it comes to students being eligible for receiving in-person transportation for the upcoming school year. So what you all will have to really decide on this year on the student level, which students will be assigned a particular schedule and what days of the week will those students with transportation will be attending school. And also we will have to require that school calendars be reflective of those days of the week as well when it comes to transportation and those transportation services. We have received phone calls from you all when this system will be open for that. Currently, we're just really waiting on a lot of decisions need to be made by the LEAs and which days of the week they will be operating. So that's why when you give us a phone call, we can discuss those particular issues. If you look at the notes down below, once we open up the system for transportation requests and calendar submissions, if there is any delay of transportation preparation on the LEAs, you all should consider to utilize the parent reimbursement or LEA reimbursement options. If your school plans on continuing distance learning at the beginning of the school year, there's no action required. So you don't have to submit a calendar in the system, and you don't have to submit any transportation requests as well. What you can do as a courtesy is send our team an email notifying us saying, hey, that your LEA will not be opening at the beginning of the school year. You will be continually distance learning, and that'll just help us out when we're doing data validation on our end. Next slide, please. As you see here on this page, you see dates and the owner of what task needs to be handled. As you look up the data submission sections, that the school will be submitting calendars and totes and uploading. We'll be assisting with you all with that, and also going through the background things, making sure that the student still qualifies for transportation, and communicating with the parents, making sure you have the correct address, things of that nature. As you see, those deadlines dates from July 6th to July 24th is currently, those are the deadlines date, but we do know that due to COVID that we're being very flexible with those dates, because we're still working on behind the scenes and waiting for information, as again I say, from your from the schools to see, how their schedule is going to be set up. That's a lot of going on with the delay of things. So once the system does open up, we're being very, lenient with things. So we'll be, working with each other to make sure that the students that will need transportation gets things submitted in a proper manner. On the transportation side of things, if you see from July 24th through the 21st, our team will be reaching out to the LEAs just for data verification purposes, and we'll be doing things internally like system configuration, data transfers, routing development, and also doing the Q&A process of route assignments and practices and things of that nature, and reaching out to the parents and just let them know what we're doing from the transportation aspect of things. If there are any questions that you all may have, you can always reach out to the TOW support line, and we'll be there Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. You can reach us at 202-576-5520, or you can send us an email at dot.data, and one of our team members will definitely reach back out to you to answer any questions, concerns that you may have. And also, LEA's data submission should be no fewer than 20 days prior than the first day of school, because we want to make sure that we're getting the students the proper and the timely that they need for the first day of school. Next slide, please. And these are our training dates here moving forward. So we still have training available. If you have anybody on your team that needs refresher training, or you have any new team members that needs training, these are the training dates that are remaining. And also, we will be at the LEA Summit next week on the 21st. We'll be there as well. So if you want to come in and get a training or get a refresher, please do sign up for those classes. Well, I think it's from 3 to 4 p.m. next week on the 21st. I don't know if Jackie or Wes, I know Wes is on, I don't know if Jackie on. If you all want to just echo in anything that I may have missed out on with these slides. Okay, Silas.
No, you did fine. Yep. Yeah, no, everything is fine.
Okay, so silence is golden. So I thank you, Wes. If there are any questions, please reach out to our team or just put them in the chat area. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we'll hand it over to Rita and Pauline to talk a little bit more about the end of year closeout and SEDS.
Awesome. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Rita Larkins with the CIO team. I'm just going to speak briefly about some of the end of year closeout activities that need to happen in SEDS, and we can move forward. Okay, so some of those main administrative activities that you need to make sure happen are the end of year service logging. So you want to make sure that providers have entered all of their outstanding service logs and also have gone ahead and created those service trackers. We're really pushing that everyone get this in before the end of the year, because when we start the new year and you flip your system, your providers will not have access to that school year in order to enter that information from the previous school year. So before you close out, you want to make sure all the providers have entered the service logs and also created service trackers. The next thing is your progress reports. Again, you want to make sure that the progress reports have been entered for all students by all of the team members on your progress reporting team. If a team member has not entered their information, you might want to reach out to them before you finalize it. Again, after you finalize these progress reports and you flip to the next school year, folks are not going to be able to access the progress reports or the service logging for the 1920 school year. It'll be closed out. So that's our reminder, just to make sure that those things get done before you flip your school year. And I'm going to turn it over to Pauline, and she's going to talk a little bit more about closing out students in the system. Pauline?
Thanks, Rita. I'm just going to talk briefly about the graduating students. So if you have graduating students that are leaving your LEA, the 1920 school year, please make sure a summary of performance is in there for each student. Please make sure you have a complete graduation with diploma form or a PWN. You don't need both. Either or will suffice. These information must be in the student's records in order to have the students administratively removed from the system. For students that are aging out of your LEA, please make sure you complete the age out form or a PWN. Those items will be essential for the data liaisons to review in the system and you to get your students administratively removed. All of the information that I just discussed here is available on the entry and exit guidance that's now posted on OSSE's website for 2021 school year. So please make sure that all these things are done in the student in SEDS in order for these students to be administratively exit off your SEDS roster. Is there any questions? Just let me know in the chat and I'll respond.
Thank you, Rita and Pauline. We'll transition into child outcome summary updates with Dawn.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dawn Hilton. I am the 619 preschool special ed coordinator. And today I will just give you a few reminders about the child outcome summary. Next slide, please. So the June 2020 cost exit data collection is due on July 31st. Eligible children that should be included in this data collection include children who are being promoted to kindergarten, any children who turn 6 years old, students who transfer outside of the state at the end of the school year, or a child who may be exited from special education. So this is a list of all the students who we should be including exit scores in for for the child outcome summary in DCCATS. Next slide, please. Recognizing that the school year ended with children participating in remote and blended learning. On this slide, you will find a list of ideals for data collection. And so these ideals include capturing student work, observation data, assessments completed prior to the school building's closing, informal assessments such as parent and caregiver interviews, notes from teachers, as well as virtual learning sessions, and then formative assessments administered virtually. So these are sources of data you can use to report exit scores. If you have any questions, my contact information is included at the end of the slide. Please feel free to reach out to me and I can answer any specific questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dawn. We will transition back to Victoria, who will share a host of announcements and reminders that we have to close out our session today.
Hi, folks. I'm also seeing, this is Victoria. I'm also seeing a lot of great questions in the chat. I've been attempting to answer a lot of them while other folks have been speaking, but forgive me if I haven't gotten to yours yet. There are a number about transportation that I'm seeing come through, so I'm hoping our transportation folks can answer those in the chat before we close out. I did want to acknowledge that many of you were hoping to receive a copy of the slides in the handouts today, in the handout module today, and we do acknowledge that that we didn't drop those in there today. I wanted to let everybody know that we had a few very last minute changes as we were prepping this morning, and so we didn't get a PDF version into the chat now. If Tiffany can dump those in while I'm talking through the reminders and announcements, that would be great. But if she can't get to it now, we will send out an email to everyone on the SPED POC contact list with those materials. And like I said, we're putting together a new splash page, but I know you guys really want these materials now, and I am in sync with you on that. So thanks for your patience. We have just a couple of reminders and announcements. The first slide here is about the LEA toolkit. This toolkit is focused on serving students with disabilities during periods of distance and blended learning. In my earlier discussion, I referred to a May 20th training that Jennifer Carpenter and our Teaching and Learning Division gave around serving students with disabilities during remote and blended learning. That May 20th session introduced this toolkit, and this toolkit is designed to provide sort of a foundation for data tracking and data collection for your recovery implementation and planning. Jen says it a million times in that session, but I'll say it again here. If your LEA already has a way they're doing this, then we would encourage you to continue on that path, but we wanted to make sure that all LEAs have a resource here. We partnered closely with some LEA folks in this work, and our partners at the Special Education Co-op and across a number of our LEAs whom are here today on this call also developed some great resources that Jen talks about in these trainings, and are part of the work related to recovery planning and implementation. So we hope that you will use all these resources in deploying that work. It is our intention to set you up with the tools to do what we're asking of you in the coming school year as you design programming for your whole schools and with students with disabilities in mind. So the next slide is about the summer 2020 professional development series that our Teaching and Learning Division is rolling out, and there are several links here to register. There are 50 different sessions of virtual PD this summer. We hope that you'll take advantage of those. On the next slide are some pieces of information around different streams of information coming to you from OSSE through different webinars and training series. We wanted to put it all on one slide because as much as we're like in the rush to get you information, it may be information overload and kind of like what do I log into and what do I not. The monthly webinar series is at the top of this slide. That's the series you're in now. Today is the July 15th one, and then Wednesday, August 19th is the next special education point of contact webinar. And then there's a new LEA special education point of contact orientation that will take place on Tuesday, July 21st. That is next week. That's for LEA special ed point of contacts who are new to their role at their LEA. It'll include an overview of the roles and responsibilities of all of your work as it relates to what OSSE puts out the door, including SEDS administrative tasks, introduction to relevant data systems, including CLIC and the OSSE support tool. I did get a question during this about like, how do I know if I'm doing my C2B transition correctly? I said, reach out to Dawn Hilton. She'll be able to talk to you through that, and provided her email address. You heard from Dawn just a minute ago about child outcome summary. The CLIC app, the early access CLIC app for students with disabilities, also has a C2B transition flag, so you know that those kids are coming to you. So again, a lot of your questions and concerns are addressed by tools that we have out there. We just need to point you in the right direction. So please join us for this this orientation if you're new to your role or if you're relevantly new to your role. There will also be an overview of OSSE's IDA monitoring process and our special education policy points that we discussed here today, and methods for receiving ongoing support and communication with OSSE. I received some questions about like, who do I contact to talk about DCCATS? That would be your IDEA monitoring liaison. So we want to make sure you have and feel connected to all of those right people and resources. Also on the slide is information about SEDS Train the Trainer session for new LEA point of contacts. This is another piece for Start of School, our Start of School initiative, that we want to make sure you know about these July sessions that begin next week. On the right-hand side of this slide is the 3-part training series for professional development around using the tool that I described on the previous slide, and digging into the 3 central tenets to your recovery planning and implementation. Those are balancing LEA discretion and flexibility, ensuring transparency and collaboration with families, and using data-driven supports, including that toolkit that I discussed. So that's a ton of information. I would encourage you, if there's one slide you're looking at today to figure out what you need to do for next year, it would be this one. Next slide. We have some additional start of school campaign notifications here related to critical transportation trainings with links to register. Those are beginning August 19th would be the next one. And then transportation's online tool tote upcoming trainings beginning next week. You can register for these, and then again in August. And then on the right-hand side of this slide is new LEA transportation point of contact orientation. This will be held on July 21st as part of our Start of School initiative. We encourage you to attend this if you are a new special education point of contact. I saw many questions about what do I do for transportation. I would encourage you to attend this training to get those answers. And moving on to the next slide. As I previously mentioned, there is an early access to incoming student data tool for schools. This is the Click app that some of you are familiar with. The resources are all pre-recorded and you can access them using the links here. The purpose of this app is to preview student level data for students who are pre-enrolled in but not yet attending your LEA, so that you can begin to plan for their arrival. The target audience is listed here if you're confused about sort of like who am I and should I attend. And then on our next slide here, we have a list of the archived resources for SEDS training, including the SEDS Basic User Guide, which should be helpful to answer some of your questions about, you know, can I do XYZ in SEDS? Those are all of our reminders. We are at 10:54. I want to thank you for your time and for receiving all this information today. Like I said, we will ensure that we provide you a copy of these slides via follow-up email. And I appreciate your attention to all the details as you are working through a very hectic and unprecedented start of school. We understand that LEAs are putting together their reopening plans for submission to OSSE by the end of the month. And we encourage you to engage closely with your LEA leaders as they consider students with disabilities in those reopening plans. On the OSSE website, there's lots of information included in the waiver application about our expectations as a state agency for students with disabilities to be incorporated there. I am also speaking next week, next Thursday, at an LEA leaders discussion hosted by the Special Education Co-op to answer questions about how to do that. And I also spoke briefly on the Deputy Mayor's call where the Special Education Co-op presented to LEA leaders last week about ensuring that students with disabilities are incorporated into that those plans. I would encourage you, as our special education points of contact in your role to be elevating these concerns to your leadership. I stand behind you and by you in those conversations, and I'm happy to engage with your leaders. If they have questions, please tell them to email me. It's victoria.glick, that's G as in George, L-I-C-K, @dc.gov. If they have questions about their responsibilities, and also to reach out to Christy Weaver Harris, whose contact information is on the last slide here, which I'll ask Tiffany to scroll to, along with all of our other contact information from today's presenters. Our next webinar will be on August 19th. You'll see the registration link come out in the LEA Look Forward, and that'll be held from 10 to 11 a.m. on August 19th. If you'd like to remain on the webinar for a few minutes, I'm going to move through some of these Q&As and answer them before we close out the session. Thanks and have a great afternoon.
Yes, and for people who are looking to have a copy of the presentation, if you have registered for today, you will receive an email from me with copies of the slides. If you received a forward communication, if you could just drop your email in the chat, and so I can add you to the email when we do send out the presentation today. And Victoria, sorry, you can, if you wanted to jump in with any of the questions that are here that you think may be for the good of the group, please do so.
Sure, so I'll just read some of these questions. We have one question that says, one major pain point has been getting a signature on the SOP. For almost all other parts of the IEP process, it's possible to proceed without a signature when a parent or student is non-responsive or declines to sign. What it says, sorry, the box scrolls as you guys input new questions. What alternatives does the LEA have in that scenario? Last year, OSSE released the update on May 29th for the 2019 graduation. It took months to connect K-12 to our liaison and get a solution path. It would be helpful to have this situation contemplated on the front end. So we are going to take that concern back and make sure that we address it expediently this year for you. I hear your concerns about delays, that is not helpful to your activities. So we'll take this concern back and make sure we circle back with you quickly. I'm going to scroll through to some of these other questions.
And again, I see a couple people asking about links on the OSSE website for this recording and for this presentation. We are launching a new web page exclusively for our monthly webinar. And as soon as that is launched, you all will receive that information to be able to have a one-stop shop to go back and review previous training webinars as well as the presentations.
So I see another question here referring to specialized instruction tracking and the initial provision of service. If it's not created during the school year, how do we ensure that initial provision is documented in SEDS beyond the initial consent form? I would encourage you to access the training that is linked in the webinar. It has a step-by-step guide as to how you can do so in SEDS. OSSE last year created a dedicated service tracking module in SEDS for this purpose. It looks very similar to the service tracking module that your related service providers use currently, but it's designed specifically for specialized instruction. And you are responsible for, as a special education coordinator, going through a number of steps to fill out that module and upload a document signed by the individual who provided that service in the classroom. Because we understand that not all general education teachers who are providing specialized instruction have access to SEDS, and so we're relying on you as a special education coordinator to conduct these activities. If you have questions after you've walked through that training, you're welcome to email me or Christy Weaver Harris directly. You're also welcome to email your IDEA monitor for additional information, and we can certainly provide you that specific technical support for your LEA. There is not a sign-in sheet. I see a question about sign-in sheets. We do not have a sign-in sheet. The training on July 21st, the link to the training registration is in this PowerPoint. So we encourage you to use that. I see a request to be added to the email list. We pull our email list from the SLED system, which is where your LEAs update their identified points of contact. If you would like to be added to LEA points of contact list for special education, you want to talk to your data administrator within your LEA and ensure they have you identified as the LEA's special education point of contact in SLED. That's SLED. It's the Student Longitudinal Data System. And so that is how we receive all of our points of contact. There are a list of like 50 different kinds of points of contact so that OSSE is sure to communicate with the right people about the right things. So contact your LEA data administrator. If you don't know who that is, you should ask your head of school. I'm working through some of these last ones. Okay, so I see some questions about when there will be guidance about how to respond to students whose behavior needs make it impossible for them to maintain safe social distancing or for whom their behavior poses a safety risk for classmates or teachers. We have heard this concern several times, and in response, the K-12 division, special education folks, and our health and wellness partners who issued the recent OSSE health and safety guidance that's posted on the COVID-19 policy website, will be hosting a special education focused technical assistance session. More information about that session will be provided in the LEA Look Forward, and we do intend to host it prior to start of school to help you all sort through some of those questions. The overarching message, though, that I do want to communicate to folks is that it may be important to begin to strategize around supports that allow you to integrate students with significant behavior needs into your recovery planning models. I do recognize that some students' behavior requires supports that might conflict with social distancing requirements, and that may therefore require levels of PPE that are not necessary for other students. But we do want to make sure that we are always considering options for accommodation rather than running right to exclusion. We want to, as special education professionals, we always want to be promoting inclusive environments and ensuring that we are exploring all options possible before determining that a student can't be served with their general education peers. So we'll work on getting you that technical assistance, but I also want to make sure that we are all on the same page about inclusive environments. And I think that's it. So we'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you for your time today. And we hope to see you again in August. Stay well.